All right, you grasshoppers. There he is, Mr. Studman himself, Patrick Barr, right there from Manhattan, coming to us live from Manhattan. Good to see you, bud. How you doing?
Good. How about yourself?
Good. So excellent. You and I talked before here about how I had a big weekend for me, the old hat for you, but I was invited down to Virginia Beach by a bunch of Navy SEALs and Special Warfare's guys to play at a charity game on Friday night. Actually, they wrote me into 2 charity games on Friday night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And then so we went out and had a couple of adult beverages and something to eat after. And then Saturday was an interesting day. We went to that iFly where we did the wind tunnel. I was like a little candy store there. And then I was very fortunate. I got to tour some of the bases there. And very emotional stuff. So Pat and I, everybody, so we were talking how for me, that's something so different, right? And for most people to be able to go on those bases, and it's like that's real life now, right? I mean, it's not just not just some movie or whatever. You're actually where all the guys train and everything, and how that must have been for you, Pat, when you first went there. So we've talked before about how you went through BUD/S and everything, but when you first enter that world, like first walk into those buildings where you train and their house and all your equipment, all that kind of stuff. Was that like, were you prepared for that?
When I actually showed up in Virginia Beach, like it was nerve-wracking. I was excited, definitely, but it was nerve-wracking because I knew as a new guy, it was going to be a little rough. And, a SEAL platoon isn't always the most welcoming place for new guys. I mean, there's some initiation stuff, some hazing, and some guys, they kind of completely ignore you until basically you prove in their mind that you're good to go. And for me, I didn't feel fully comfortable until after I got back from my first deployment, until after I had proven myself and I was no longer a new guy. It was always a little stressful. You'd go on these training trips and you'd be learning. I mean, like I said, it would be like drinking water out of a fire hose. So it was stressful, and there was always scrutiny, and you were always being looked at. And the guy in the locker next to you, you were next to him for a year, and he never said a word to you. So it's stressful. Now, at the same time, during that first workup before deployment, bonded really closely with all the new guys and made some amazing friends. And then later on, when the older guys were on board, great friends there too. But at first it was, there's kind of an aura about it. It's a bit intimidating when you're first stepping on the base as a new guy. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of like showing up to BUD/S. BUD/S is the same way. You show up and you're like, wow, I'm here. And it's rough.
So, I mean, you're in there, you got no choice, right? You've made the decision, you're going to be a Navy SEAL. You've got to fight through this stuff. Had you been like that in the past where you were kind of a risk taker or whatever, but you were willing to stick your neck out there a little bit more, try something different?
What's funny is I really wasn't growing up. Growing up, I wasn't really, I was kind of a quiet, introverted kid. The only thing that I tried playing rugby in college. I played rugby for 4 years and had no idea how to play when I walked onto the team, but that's how everybody is. So there was no real risk there. And that's why, I think people were kind of surprised when I decided to go into the SEAL teams. I think a lot of people were kind of trying to talk me out of it, because they had never seen kind of that kind of behavior from me before.
Right. So what do you think changed? Was there something that went on your mind, or you just had made up your mind you want to be a SEAL and you just dealt with whatever came your way?
I just made up my mind. When I say obsessed with becoming a SEAL, like I was obsessed, I read a couple books, and I read one book about going through BUD/S 3 times. I had a bunch of stuff underlined, and, it was just really, I just became obsessed with doing that job, and, I had met a SEAL mentor, and he was a fascinating guy to me. And I just became, I think I told this on one of the other podcasts, but I told my dad, I'm coming home in a body bag. I'm not ringing that bell and quitting. And also, the risk is there if you quit. I mean, you're sitting on a ship for a few years. So that is not a life I wanted to live at all.
Right.
That's
interesting too, because I think just so everybody is aware here, we got Patrick Barr, former Navy SEAL, on with me. Patrick and I have become pretty close here, and Patrick is retired. We're talking again just to rehash things. I was at Virginia Beach this past weekend and got to witness a lot of great stuff from tour on the Navy SEAL bases, and we're just talking about what it was like to break out of that comfort zone and do something that's so different, right? I mean, it's like, how many people ever think to themselves, well, I'm going to go on a Navy SEAL base and, go through BUD/S, and how different that is. And I think back for me in my life too, where I was the same way when I was a kid. I was obsessed with playing in the National Hockey League. And there were so many times where like you were doing things that you're trying out for new teams. You're walking into a new locker room with new kids on the team. And, you get them a little bit like sick feeling in your stomach. Like,
okay.
Yeah, right. It's like, party that doesn't want to do it, but the other party, just like you said now, is you're so obsessed with that end goal, you just take whatever comes your way. And I think for people who are watching, a lot of times, sometimes people are afraid to try new things. They'll have a dream or a goal. They want to be something, and they're stuck in a world that's okay. They're getting by, they're getting, paying the bills and everything, but they've got this dream or goal, and they're just afraid to break out of it. And I think that you and I are both saying to everybody what we went through was really like, it's not like we had some special skill or we were these, the bravest guys on the planet or whatever. It was that we just decided the dream and the goal was more important than the pain or the fear that you had to go through, to get there. So
there were a lot of guys coming into BUD/S who had much more interesting backgrounds than me, who were much more talented athletically, who ended up washing out. It's just really focusing on having that goal and just not letting anything stand in your way,
Yeah, I even noticed in small ways now too, that we went on this wind tunnel in iFly, and I think maybe people have see it on my Instagram and Facebook and everything, where it's really not that big of a deal. It looks like a big thing. There's this huge fan underneath and it's blowing air up and you're floating.
Yeah.
And but again, on Saturday I'm there and I'm with a bunch of Navy SEALs and guys that have done this, for the real thing, jumping out of a plane.
Right.
And there's about 5 or 6 of us there, and I get a little, there's little butterflies going on inside there because you just don't want to look stupid out there. Yeah. And the guy says to me, he says to the whole group, he says, "Who's going to go first?" And automatically I popped my hand up right away because I didn't want to be sitting there watching everybody else do it and then feel like, oh God, I've never done it before, so I wanted to get in there first. And that was really, like little things like that you think about, where I was the same as you when I was a little kid. I was that shy little farm boy, and I never would have, I don't think I would have ever put my hand up first, and it just seems like you learn over time from doing it over and over, like in your case, that you just get used to being, even though you're not the most extroverted guy out there, but you say, right, I'm going to do this, I'm putting my hand up first.
And I think it's important in life to get out of your comfort zone, I think you live a more fulfilled life if you can figure out how to do that. So making that leap into the Navy or working your butt off to get to the pros, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be anything that extreme. Like you said, raising your hand first or volunteering or something like that. Like I watched a YouTube video about, what's his name? He's a pro MMA fighter, a legend, Forrest Griffin. Oh. And there's a show called The Ultimate Fighter. I don't know if you know it.
No.
And all these guys live in a house and they compete for a contract to get into the UFC. Yeah. This guy was talking about how he got picked up to go on the show, and he was sitting at the airport and he got so nervous he didn't board the plane. And it took Dana White, the president of the UFC, to call him and plead his case. And Forrest Griffin ended up going on to win The Ultimate Fighter, that TV show, and then he became light heavyweight champion of the world. He was literally just going to go back home and live, do the 95 thing, and that's fine. That's a fine thing. But if he didn't take that leap of faith and he didn't get out of that comfort zone, he wouldn't be this legendary UFC guy.
Totally. And one of the things I think people are afraid of is failing, right? I mean, it's like inevitably, if you're going to get out of that comfort zone, I would just about guarantee you that everyone is going to fail at some point at doing something, right? It's not going to be perfect. You're going to take those 3 steps forward and a step backwards. So for you, I mean, you must have had times when you were going to SEALs where you screwed up, right? You messed up something in a training method. How'd you get through all that?
You just have to have thick skin because they're gonna lay it on you. Like when you're a new guy and you're doing like close quarters combat, I mean, it's really complex stuff. You know, I mean, think about going through a giant maze of a house at night where no one's talking with the lights off, where you're just looking through these green tubes, and you have to know what everybody else is doing. You know what I mean? You have to, without communicating. It's like this, almost like this intricate dance, but like people can really get hurt. And I would screw up all the time at first, you know? And I think it was having those guys to pull me aside and coach me, number one. Number two, like when guys were giving me crap about it, it's like, you know what? I know all you guys screwed up too when you were new guys. You know, I've seen you guys now screwing up. Like no one's perfect, and you just gotta put your head down and get through it.
Right. And that was the thing for me when I first turned pro too, you know, because all my life I'd grown up as a kid in Canada watching the NHL and watching NHL players. And it was like this, I guess this mindset built up that these were these perfect guys. Right. Like on and off the ice, they're just perfect people. And I think I respected them almost too much when I first turned pro. In that I didn't give myself enough credit, right?
Yeah.
When you make a mistake. But you're right. I think I realized like I got that end goal was so important to me that once I made a mistake, I learned to, you know, not sit there and feel sorry for myself, but to get up and get more pissed off, right? And go get something. Right. You know, made that mistake. I think that's part of the key too. Like everybody talks about, you know, just get up every time you fall down. Well, I think that's true. You got to get up every time you fall down. But to me, I think you got to get up with a vengeance after you fall down, right?
Definitely.
Right. Especially if somebody else has knocked you down. And now, so like you're in a fight, you're in a confrontation. Somebody knocks you down. Maybe it's a business deal for somebody else, and they get knocked down. If that person gets back up again with a vengeance and goes harder, well, the person that knocked him down is going, "What do I have to do here? This guy just won't quit." Right? I mean, it's probably the same thing you went through.
Totally, you can't be timid. And I remember reading those books that I was obsessed with early on. And the guys all had like these amazing backgrounds, like all the people who I was reading through who were going through BUD/S, like they were all, you know, rock climbers and pro this and pro that. And I was none of that stuff, you know. I was an average athlete, and I was like, man, like you let it kind of intimidate you, but then you make that leap. And when you get around them, you realize they're not these perfect rock stars. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of them are, but you know, everybody screws up.
Yeah, but that is the truth, though. Like even the guys that are maybe the cut above, those legendary people, they're still just people, right? They're, you know, like I was fortunate to play with Wayne Gretzky, and I have total respect for him. So when I say this, I mean this out of total respect. Just one of the greatest athletes that's ever played any sport. But he was just a man. He was no different than anybody else. He had faults, and he had good days and bad days. And I think that's the thing you gotta remember when you're going for stuff. It's that fine line, right? Like you want to, like, I know you're the same way when you go into the teams there. At first, you want to respect those older guys, but you can't respect them too much, right? And then not give yourself enough credit.
It's just fine. Like you can't put people like on this pedestal where you're just like, you know, tiptoeing around them because you think they're the greatest thing of all time because they've done 5 combat deployments or whatever. They're going to screw up too. And not everybody that's done 5 combat deployments is that good, to be honest with you. You know, there's a tendency, and it's funny to me how when you first show up, at least for me, when I first show up to my team, how you have this one view of everybody. Right. And then fast forward 2 years, and it like half those views are completely flip-flopped.
Right. I think, it's like, we can sit here and talk about it, but I think it's almost like you have to go through that too, right? As a young person. I think that's actually important for, like, to talk about, hazing and all that kind of stuff. Well, I mean, I don't know how much hazing ever really helped, like the physical hazing, like shaving somebody's head or whatever, that kind of stuff. But it's more the mentality that you are the young guy. You haven't proven yourself yet. These guys have done it before, so you need to respect them. But, as you go through the process, you're going to look back, just like you said, you're going to look back and say, what was I so impressed about? They're just human beings. But it's like, I don't think there's any way to get around that. I don't think you want to get around that. I think you need to live through that. and realize that you do have to pay the price to get where those guys are, because they paid the price too, right?
Absolutely, not totally. And I mean, remember walking into your new high school for the first time?
Oh yeah,
it looked a lot different than what it did when you were walking out the next.
That's a good point. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, just everything's different. Everything's a little new, a little scary, and then you get familiar with it, and everything is just, you have a completely different view of it when you're leaving.
I remember when I went to my first training camp, and so that's 1980, a long time ago. And back then, the old guys didn't do hardly anything during the summer. They relaxed and rested up their bodies. So it was our job as young guys to come in and try to impress the coaches and come in shape. So one of these great old players is Phil Esposito, and Phil was actually, my first year was Phil's last year in the league. So this was going to be his last training camp. And I'd watched Phil play for decades. He was a god in the hockey world, especially up in Canada. And my job was to hit people, coming to training camp. So I was big, I was in shape and everything. I worked out all summer. And we were at our practice facility up here in Rye, New York. And Phil came through, it was a scrimmage. It was early, so it wasn't like full intensity. But Phil started skating through the neutral zone. He's got his head down. And I'm thinking, well, I've got to hit him. That's my job. And I remember I hit him, and I knocked him right on his rear end. It was a great hit and everything, and he was steaming. Right, he gets up, he's like "F you" and "F that," and thinking myself, what have I done? Like, I've dreamed all my life to get here to the National Hockey League, and here I have. I'm knocked down like one of these gods. I'm going to get cut.
Right.
And I just was so, like, I remember all the thoughts going on in my mind. But it was one of those deals that worked out, because once he settled down, we went in the locker room after practice. He came walking over to me, and I'm thinking, oh, here we go. Pack your bags. He's getting you thrown out. And he was great. He goes, he says, "You want to make this team, don't you?" I said, "Well, yeah, I've dreamed all my life of playing the National Hockey League." He says, I was mad at you when you knocked me down, but I respect you for doing that. Right. So it's like, it really worked out well that I was willing to do, like, it was that split second decision, but it worked out well. Now this old guy respected for what I did. Right. So,
well, by the way, you can't be a pushover. Like, I remember, especially when I was an older guy and I saw new guys show up to my team, like, you would see those guys, like, not many of them, but there were a few that were timid. They tiptoe around. They were a little nervous in the house. And then there were the guys that were like sprinting into the house with their weapons drawn to take it down, and you don't want, look, sometimes if a guy's really getting on you, sometimes you got to punch him in the face. Yeah. Like, that's the way, that's just the culture. And if you don't do that, people are going to think you're a pushover. They're not going to want you around. You're not going to get to go to cool schools like sniper school. You'll just kind of be cast aside, Right. So you have to draw that fine line of being respectful, but also not being a pushover. Right.
And I think that's a lesson for people, like, even in the workplace, right? I mean, you don't go looking for confrontations, whether you've been there for 10 years or 10 days, but you don't let people push you around either, or that'll just continue. They won't have any respect for you, right? So it's the same thing. Right. You're on the teams there. People need to know they need to know that you're man enough and tough enough and everything to go do your job too. It's the same thing when I'm playing. That Phil now had confidence that, okay, we get into a game. If I'm going to knock down Phil Esposito in practice, he's pretty confident I'm going to knock down guys during the game on the other team, right? So I think it's the same. Right? You got to stand up for yourself, but it's they can allow people to give them a chance. You don't just automatically turn on somebody, but if you give them a chance and they're still getting on you, you got to stick up for yourself.
Yeah, you need to be, especially in the SEAL teams, you need to be super aggressive. And not reckless, but you, like, they want the guy that's going to be aggressive. Like, we would always love those new guys that came in and they were just giving it their all when we were doing these drills. If we were out in Arkansas doing land warfare or doing whatever, it was, are you going to be aggressive or are you a little timid around shooting? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. The one thing, and obviously I've got to be careful with names here, but there was one guy who was he was a captain for his team, and he gave me a tour around the building, and man, it was just so impressive being around a guy that had done so much in his career, but wasn't walking around like he'd done so much in his career, right? Like, he was just walking around like he was a good guy. I think you go through that period, so you break out of your comfort zone, you do something that is you dreamed of doing or a goal or whatever. And then you've accomplished it. It's important then to it's important to be able to look in the mirror every once in a while, be happy with what you've seen. But again, now move on, right? Don't be so full of yourself that, trying to tell everybody. And I really got that sense with almost every guy that was down there in Virginia Beach that I'd met that was part of the teams. They'd probably done more stuff than I'll ever dream of doing, in terms of, battling through things. But they didn't act like that, right? They were just good guys.
Yeah. And I think SEALs get a bad reputation because they write all these books and they do these movies as kind of being cocky, but 90% of the ones that I know are very down to earth, humble guys.
Yeah. Totally confident, right? You're right. Oh, yeah. Totally confident in themselves. We're out there, like I said, we're out there playing hockey, and some of the guys are. You can tell with them they're not the best players out there and everything, and they're not. It's a charity game. There's little kids out in the ice and everything, so they're being respectful. But you can tell they're just chomping at the bit, like they want to get after it. If they've got that with whatever they do, they want to get after things. So it's a lot of fun.
Totally, that's always the mentality. And I don't know, the guys who were the best on the teams were the guys who were. I mean, they were just confident. You know what I mean? Obviously, I mean they were kind of. Some of them, a lot of them were just quiet, kind of confident.
Right.
They weren't the guys, just ready to jump down a new guy's throat. They were the ones ready to pull them aside and be like, "Hey, look, here's a better way of doing that." Or, they were just good leaders.
And do you think that's the thing in life too, where, you're like in your case, you're really not an extrovert. You're kind of a quiet guy. You do something that's a little bit different. You fight through all the things you got to fight through to get there, and then. It's important that once you're there, you're nearing the top of your profession. To me, the real strong person isn't the person that pushes everybody else down to make himself feel better. The real strong person is the one that reaches down and grabs the other guy and pulls him up, right? In whatever sense, it may be in the workplace, the family situation. That to me, that's the real strong, confident person, right?
No, those are the best leaders. I mean, Chris is actually a great example of that. He'd always. He was never ready to just shut you out and get rid of you. It was like, hey, come on, we can make you better. Let's figure this out together. And he was always great at that.
Yeah. I'm going to put up, I hope this is Ron Jameson. I hope you don't mind here. I'm going to put up your comment here. I'll show everybody what you said here. So this is Ron Jameson, one of our followers. I was a damage control firefighter in the Navy. My worst fear was water. The drills I went through got me past that fear, water over my head, etc. Interesting, right? So, it's something that fear, like instead of avoiding it, take it head on, right?
Well, it's pretty amazing that you'd be afraid of water and you join the Navy.
Yeah.
You join any other branch. Yeah, it's good for you, man.
Yeah. See, and I like that attitude, right? So he's obviously had a dream and a goal. He knew he was afraid of water, but he still went after it, right? I think that's.
No, he did drills and he figured it out. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm afraid.
So guys, listen, I know you were on last week, the three of us, Pat and myself and Robbie Sherwood, our trainer. I just want to remind everybody, we have our ruck run going to get started here. The run actually being a little over a month, but in probably about a week and a half, we're going to get started with our online training program. So I want to remind everybody about that. It's going to be fun for everybody. This is going to be our first one that we do. And we want to make sure that everybody understands we want this for everybody involved. Doesn't matter what your conditioning level is. That's the whole idea of the ruck run. You'll have a backpack and if you're in great shape, you put more weight in that backpack. If you're not in great shape, you put less weight in there. So it's going to be, something it's not like an intimidating thing that we're going to go out there and train you to be a Navy SEAL today. We're just going to go out and have some fun. And the big part of it, I know Pat and I and Robbie all feel the same way. It's a big part of the True Grit life. And what we believe as people, the mental part of it, and how important that is to prove to yourself, just like the stuff we talked about today, that there's really nothing you can't do. If you want to do it, and I know it sounds very corny, people say this all the time, but it is the truth. You're sitting here watching two guys right now that weren't the best at whatever we did, but we reached some pretty high levels of what we do. So our buddy Pat here, he's going to lead the way. All right, so you and I going to have a little challenge here between the two of us, who's in better shape on this thing or what?
I think we might have to.
Yeah. So how much weight would you put in your backpack?
Probably 35. That's what we did in Buds.
Oh, 35. Is that pretty standard?
Yep. That's what the sandbag in Buds was 35 pounds.
Yeah. Well, so now I have to get 36 in mine then, right?
Yeah, there you go. You got a one up.
All right, good. All right, guys. So Pat and I'll be back maybe again later on in the week, but we'll definitely be updating you on our ruck run. And again, we'll get started on our online training program, probably about a week and a half, 10 days. Really looking forward to that. We're going to have a lot of fun with that. So Pat, good job. We'll talk to you.
Thanks, Tom. Have a great one.
See you guys.
Later.